Okay, so we are starting what I think is going to be the final shiur on the Shiur for this time around, the fifth shiur. Talk about two shilas that are very Negiah L'Maisa, very important shilas. Let me just let that in here. Okay, see if anybody else is trying to get in. Okay. So we want to talk about two very important shilas here to end off our discussion of the Shiur for this time around. First one is a constant shilah, and everybody's asked about this. It's a constant, as we know, anybody involved in Shiur knows, it's a question of inviting people for Shabbos when they're going to end up driving. So, obviously a complicated shilah and a very Negiah L'Maisa shilah, and very hard to deal with Shiur if we don't have this resolved. So, Rav Moshe famously has a tshuva, which we gave out in Orach Chaim Aleph Simitzadi Tes. This goes back a long time to Tafshin Yud Gimel. So this goes back this goes back to about 70 years ago. The shilah already was brought to Rav Moshe from Rav in Detroit, and so Rav Moshe is very, very machmir when it comes to this. Rav Moshe there says that there the shilah wasn't a Shiur shilah per se. It was a shilah inviting people to come to shul. You need people for a minyan. So there are two shilahs. It was a shilah of the actual invitation that they're going to come and drive on Shabbos to become part of the minyan. And number two, can you be mitzaref them to the minyan? So we're not going to go into the part two that we saw ourselves. But the etzem shilah that we're discussing now, the Shiur shilah. So Rav Moshe says here in this shilah that he answered this person, this Rav who asked him that if he shocked to the Hazman Isra Achokim, but open Shiyafshar Shiyavo below Chil Shabbos, Vada Asar. If they could not come without Chil Shabbos, then it's clearly Asar. And he says, Hu od garua mi Isra Lifnei Iver, Shar hu oid mi Isra Mesis. There's a whole another shilah. Moshe puts in here that there's a shilah of Mesis, which we know that the Rambam says the Isra Mesis Mediach comes on the Gemara in Sanhedrin, and that over there the Gemara says Lo Sachma Lov, and you can't have any chemla, you can't any mercy on him, and you have to. There's all kinds of dinim that you have from Mesis that we're mahadr lechavasa l'schuso. If anybody has a time of l'schuso, we don't listen to it. We're looking to destroy him, to destroy this kind of influence in Klal Yisrael. So Mesis is a very, very severe avera, which Rav Moshe says even though the Gemara only says Isra Mesis by Avodah Zarah, so he says a chiddush, which wouldn't have known ourselves from the sugya, that we stipulate that it's dafka by Avodah Zarah, that's only the guy with the chiyuv misa, that we're machmin of Eden, we hide Eden, and without hazara, we don't have to be maser him, we hide Eden, and if we think that he's going to try to entice somebody to do Avodah Zarah, Eden are allowed to hide in the closet and listen, and then come up and afterwards be made invasion against him and killed, even though there was no Ashara. We always have, there's a din of Ashara, they have to be Masir him before. That's only by Shari Surim, not by Isra Mesis. So Moshe says that that we say Mesis Dafka by Avodah, that's only the Gabi the Chiyuv Misa of Mesis. But the Gabi the Isra Mesis, Klape Shmaya, that there is by any Avera. If you entice people to do Averas, there's an Isra Mesis by any Avera. Chiddush or Moshe. I'm not sure, okay, I mean, it makes it more chomer for sure. So Rav Moshe ends off saying that he says that the Isra Lifnei, so it's interesting. I'm not sure where he's coming from totally, but maybe I have a stucco shot. We'll try to save shot of him. He says that the Isra Mesis will only be if it's Efshar Binyan Acher. Like if there's no way you could walk there, then there's an Isra Lifnei Iver and Isra Mesis. Mashain can, if he could get there himself, it is close enough to walk. Just you think that he'll be misatzel, he'll be lazy, and he won't want to walk, or he doesn't have such an Indian of walking with all. Like if you're going someplace that's going to be more than a 5 or 10 minute walk, this guy's for sure going to drive, even though he could theoretically walk. So Rav Moshe holds that in that case, since he could, it's normal to walk, but he just doesn't want to. So then the Isser of Macy's, you can't say there is. You're not the one that's Macy's him Lavera. He's deciding himself to do it. You're not Macy's. However, he wants to say Lifnei Iver, it is. It still will be Lifnei Iver. So there's two Gedarim for Macy's and Lifnei Iver, according to Moshe. Which is interesting. He's saying that even if a person is misatzel, if he could walk there, he could get there himself, but he doesn't, so then you're still over Lifnei Iver, which of course is a connected what we said until now, that it has to be Trey Iver Nahara, that if it's only if it's on the other side of the river, a place where he can't get to, then we consider it Lifnei Iver. So why is the Moshe saying that even if you could get someplace, but you don't, but you decide not to, it's also called Lifnei Iver? I think the Pshat in Ramosha is that we saw this in the poskim earlier in the last couple of times, that if we have a zoken, for example, that's hard for him to walk, even if it's the same side of the river, then it's still called Kapahim, it's Trevid and Nahar. Trevid and Nahar is not a Metzias, it's more of a hashara of if it's within the grasp of this person to do it, or normally would do it. So Moshe takes it a step further in saying that from the din of Zakan, you would only learn if your mamish can't get to it, even though he's on the same, it could be 2 feet away, you can't reach it. You can't reach it. It'd be like the Chazon Ish writes in a letter that sometimes when he writes, as soon as he's donning, let's say a Rashba, write that Ein Sefer Rashba Biyadi, to look inside. He said it doesn't necessarily mean it's not in a room. He just said he learned to the end of his kochos, he doesn't have the strength to get up to get the Rashba. So that whether you can get up and get something or not can be very relative to your kochos. And so with our Moshe, I would have thought that it depends mamish on your kochos, if you could or couldn't, not on what you decide to do. But Ramosh is taking a step further and saying that if it's out of the realm of what's normal for a person who's not from, to consider that if you give an invitation, he's coming to a formal invitation, he's going to wear a suit and tie and everything, and so that's not a time that a non-from person thinks he's going to start taking a long walk. You're going to come in sweaty, whatever. It's outside of the realm of what a average non-from person would think of doing. So even though he could do it, it's within. Rahil David said that he considers the Lifnei Iridika hashara of how much walking is around 40 minutes. People walk up to about 40 minutes. Past that, it's already considered like too far. People don't think of doing it. But Moshe holds even less than that. If the person is not that type of person that would be walking it, then it's already considered Lifnei Iver with that sheer of less. Even though he's strong enough, he could do it. It's not a zakah, and he could walk that much. But Ramosha is not explaining all this, but I think that's the shot in Ramosha why he say even though it's not Macy's, because Macy's depends on the physical ability to do it, and if you could theoretically, then it's not Macy's. But Lifnei Iver it still is. So Ramosha is very, very machmer in this, and doesn't find it tzad hetzer at all in his tshuva. And I heard from Rav Shmuel first that Ramosha Taka was never makel of this. He was always very, very machmer that there was no hetzer of inviting someone to a Shabbos invitation if it meant driving. Ramosha Lamaisa, there's another famous tshuva that he talks about bar mitzvahs, and he says over there that ilu haya biyadi, if I would have the koach to do it, I would be mevatel the entire Indian of bar mitzvahs in America. So there won't be bar mitzvahs. Who said there needs to be bar mitzvahs? Bar mitzvah celebrations. I mean mevatel completely, because all it does is cause tremendous chilul Shabbos. So without any tzad kiruv or any tzad skarvus or chizuk or anything comes out of it, even for the bar mitzvah boy, it'd be few and far between where even the bar mitzvah boy gets any chizuk out of his own bar mitzvah. It's all about the gifts and about the party and everything else, and you have to go through this boring foreign language thing I got to read, and everybody say do a great job, and pat them back and say now you're a man, you did a great job. And that's about the extent of it for most kids. He said he would be vassal completely. For sure, anybody that's involved with any bar mitzvah situation, it's a mitzvah gdola to figure out a way to do it during the week. Do it on Rosh Chodesh, do it on a Monday or Thursday, and figure out a way to do it like that rather than doing it on Shabbos. Who said it needs to be on Shabbos? wait for a Sunday that's a Rosh Chodesh or something like that. That it's a day you can get up and read or something and have Kriyas Torah rather than anyway. That's Rav Moshe Shita. There is no heter whatsoever. And Rav first told me a Maisa, which I don't think is a total right to this, but Shmuel first had a Maisa in Chicago when the Russians first started coming over. I think it was like '86 or those years then to America, and they had a possibility of doing a big Shabbaton to carve a lot of the Russians. So he called Rav Moshe about it, and Rav Moshe said they're going to be driving. How can you do that? And first said he started arguing with them, and he said, "Okay, Frega under, go ask somebody else." Rav Moshe wouldn't find a heter for it. Now, it could be that that's cholek from this case, from our regular case, because there, since it's a David Milson the Farhesia, there could be a lot of people driving, a lot of these Russians are coming. It's not like, we have an individual that you invited over. They might drive and when they park in front of your house, not in front of your house, but it doesn't cause a whole ruckus and a whole people noticing all around that there's a tremendous Chil Shabbos going on with Jews getting out of cars and walking into shuls and everything. So maybe that would be different, perhaps different than over here. But the Maisa, Rav Moshe wasn't makel even for Yechidim. So you saw on the other hand, Rav Shlomo Zalman, letter we sent out from the Tshuva, in Michal Shlomo, that Rav Shlomo Zalman seems to have a very different mahalach in this. There he writes, Mutar lahazmin gam mi shagar rachok mimokam tefillah. You're allowed to invite someone even if he lives far away from the place of the tefillah. L'atzil l'mokom lina karov l'mokom ba'ofen shali tzarech klal achal Shabbos. As long as you offer him a place to sleep overnight, that if he takes that, he won't have to be Mechal Shabbos to get to shul. So you have to offer him a place to sleep. Even though he doesn't accept your offer, since you made that offer, you can't say, you don't need to say to him, okay, if you're not going to accept that, then don't come. Once you made the offer, his decision not to take it is not your yotzei. You're giving him the opportunity to not be Mechal Shabbos. If he decides not to, then that is no longer your problem. You're not obligated to tell him that you're not allowed to come by car. Okay, a chiddush from Shlomo Zalman. Now he goes on to the next piece to say that the parking lot has to be closed because you can't be showing that you're inviting people to come to park. So that it says you're mechuyev to have that closed. That's already chiyuv in the Rav mitzvah tachsise basic knesses, that everything in the shul itself, b'chefza, has to be a shomer Shabbos. You can't take away from that. Al Kopanim, Rosh Hashanah is taking a whole different tact over here, saying that even if you couldn't get there, if you offer him a place to sleep, then it's okay. So what's the score? What's the Nekudas on Machlokas? Shlomo Zalman and Rav Moshe. So I think that to understand this, I think there's 2 points in Rav Shlomo Zalman which see, one of them he said beferish, and one I think is also nichlal b'dvarav, as we already discussed in the last year, or 2 years ago, I forgot which one, that the shaila of giving food to somebody not from l'shem kiruv, to carve them. So we had different mahalchim in the poskim that most poskim took on that it is a shaila of nifnei, just they had all kinds of tzliyas and steakas that maybe perhaps he's going to not really eat it, or he's going to give it to somebody else, or maybe he washed early in the morning and he was shomer yadav. But all these things we said don't apply bisman hazeh to people that are for sure not making brachos. They don't even know what such thing as washing, or if they do, they're not doing it. That's only for those fanatic Orthodox Jews, whatever. It's not negay to them at all. So there's no tzad that maybe they're going to do it the right way. So Shlomo Zalman there had we said a big picture mahalach, looking, and you need to be him to say such a thing, but that was his big picture, is that what the Torah asks us to put in front of them a mikshel, by giving them food not to make a bracha, that is a mikshel. You're tripping up, you're making things worse for them. Klapei Shmaya, they're scarves of Kadosh Baruch Hu. But what you're putting in front of them is not a mikshel, but it's a siyua to get closer to Kadosh Baruch Hu, like through this food, true, there's not going to be a bracha, but this food is going to bring him far closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu than any bracha would, or it's bringing him far closer to Hashem than the lack of the bracha is taking him away from Hashem. So if you look at the sum total, yeah, there is a mikshal, but there's a bigger growth coming out of it than the mikshal is. Then the sum total of what you're doing is not a mikshal, rather it's a ma'aseh kiruv, not a ma'aseh mikshal. That was a broad picture of way of looking at this. So I think that's Nichol and Rav Shlomo Zalman saying over here is that the person is number one, and this I heard from him, is that the tzad harishon is that there's no lifnei ivra over here, is he's driving anyway. He doesn't need your invitation for him to drive. So anyway, he's going to be driving. You see, maybe he'll stay home, but if he wants, he'll go. Like, you don't need you to drive. He'll probably be driving somewhere else. If he doesn't drive to you, he's probably going to drive to the McDonald's or something like that. So if he doesn't go to Friday night, he's going to go somewhere else to eat, not kosher. So number one, it's not trey with a nahar at all. There's no different era inside that. Number two, also, I think that he didn't say this to me, but I think that it's a nichlal. What he said is that the iskarvus b'chalal that's going on is greater even than the fact that it's Michal Shabbos. His Chil Shabbos, so it's Meshogeg, it's not what he's doing, but you're bringing closer to Yiddishkeit. There's a chance out of this that he'll eventually be Shomer Shabbos. So that was his cheshbon over here. That if you're so then what's the problem? So what really is the problem? So the problem is not more than it's a problem of Chil Shabbos or the Lifnei Iver, it's a problem of Chil Hashem. That Chil Hashem, that this guy, one day he'll wake up and realize what Shabbos is. Well, let's say he becomes from one day, and then he'll turn around and think, oh, this rabbi just invited me for Shabbos, and he didn't care about it. He just cared that I came to the shul, and I think what Rosh Hashanah is trying to avoid is I was once inviting somebody for Shabbos, and I told him that I'd like to have him stay over or whatever, and he told me that my other Orthodox rabbi never asked me these things before. So he said, you know what, that rabbi couldn't care. I'll quote him, a blankety blank bit about me keeping Shabbos or not. He just cares that I help him make up his minyan in shul. That's what we want to avoid. That's the Chil Hashem we want to avoid. So by you always inserting in your invitation for Shabbos that, if you'd like the whole Shabbos experience, you're more than welcome to come and sleep over, or you figure out some way to invite him that there is a possibility of not being Chal Shabbos. One day when he wakes up and he realizes what was going on, he'll understand the Mafreya. Oh, that's what he was saying to me. Now I understand. Now I chop why he kept saying that strange thing to me, like sleeping in his house. Like, what is that? Since when do I? He'll say, oh, he was trying to avoid Chil Shabbos. So, and I didn't take the hint. So, you're masalik through that, the Chil Hashem. That's what Shlomo Zalman means. As long as you offer the place to sleep, you make that possibility, like we always do for our Shabbatones, for example. Whenever we do Shabbatones in the Kollel, we always, with the Shlomo Zalman's Tanai over here, we always insert in there that home hospitality available. That anybody wants to, make it clear, anybody wants to stay over, we'll arrange you a place to stay. And that takes away the Chil Hashem Shaboy, that you're inviting people to come in Shabbos even though they might come far, because you're offering to do it in a way without Chil Shabbos.
Rabbi, I get the distinction that Rav Shlomo Zalman is making, but how is it different from mitzvah haba ba'avera? In other words, it's part of the kiruv, and you're giving the food, and you're giving the Shabbos experience, but it seems to be that the ends justifying the means.
Okay, so that's it. The question is, whose avera is it? In other words, Klapi, the one that's mazmin in him, so then he has no avera. I can't be, I can't, let's say, be chatei amanash yishka chavercha. I can't do an avera to be mizaka yanin. But here I'm not doing any avera. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. There is no avera over here. The only avera would be Chil Shabbos. There's not any more than him driving here who's driving there. So copy my Lifnei Iver. So I'm not over Lifnei Iver. He certainly doesn't mention anything about Mesis. That's Rav Moshe's Kiddush. I don't know. Nobody else besides Rav Moshe talks about Mesis. That's Peled Gazach. I'm not, and I think Rosh Hashanah would say as well, I'm not being Mesis him Chil Shabbos. I'm being Makar of him to Yiddishkeit. In other words, it's not the ends justify the means. I mean, he actually uses a lashon that there are sometimes he used to say lasak b'divisara. It's an asik, and sometimes sometimes you have to lose a little bit over here to gain over here. And he said that to make that shikul, you need two things: seichel and yiras shamayim. He used to always say the pasuk v'nimtza chaim v'seichel tov bein elokim v'adam. So you need seichel tov and you need bein elokim v'adam. You need seichel and you need yiras shamayim. Sometimes I would ask him these type of shilas, and he would say, "What do you need my seichel for? Use your own seichel. Just seichel and yiras shamayim. Just use your own seichel and figure it out." So in this case, so he says that he's saying that the yid that's coming is being over the areas of Chil Shabbos, but you're not being guarded at Chil Shabbos because he's going to drive anyway, and you have no lifnei iver because since he can drive anyway, it's traved in the heart. All the tanoim involved are there. That what we do. He did say about Peh. We gave out the pages from the Madani Shlomo. So he added a few nakudas of this. The first nakuda is, and this is I think the most important nakuda, is that he was very, very extremely upset beyond words that I can tell you. We discussed this a number of times. He was extremely upset that this letter got out to the public. It was printed in Shlomo, Chelik Beis. He said to me that he wrote this specifically for one Rav or Sameach for his specific case. He did not mean to say a klal and just give a klal out there in Chil Shabbos. He said to say a klal and a heter of Chil Shabbos is a chorban of Yiddishkeit. It's a chorban of das. So rather, every single time it's a new hara shah. To come to a psak of to be Mechal Shabbos for the sake of Kiruv, each time is a new hara shah. So there is no Shulchan Aruch of this of Chil Shabbos. That here's the times you can be Mechal Shabbos. Each time you have to don kol mikra legufo. Every single time it's a new shiloh. Otherwise, you've destroyed Shabbos and you make a keres from Chil Shabbos, and that's a bigger korban than what you're trying to save or trying to do. That was number one. Rashul first had a ma'aseh with him that he went to discuss this with him, and he had in his hand a copy of the tshuva, and he was holding the tshuva in his hand. Someone was on the saw, and he was asking a question from the tshuva, and Rashul was on and grabbed it out of his hands. He said that was a private tshuva. That's you shouldn't have that. So he said the Rosh Yeshiva should know that the Rosh Yeshiva can have that one because there's plenty more where this came from. And he said his tsar was tremendous when he heard that. And we discussed it a number of times also, and he was very, very mitzvah. A certain one of his people that listened to him, his Shiur, also printed it in an English book. And that caused it even more tsar that it should be out in an English book. It makes it even more hamoin, hamoinam. So there's a heter Chil Shabbos. He had tsar out in Shiur. And when they did print it in, after he passed away, they printed it in Chelik Beis of Mincha Shlomo. So I went over to his son, Baruch Zatzal, and said, "How did you print this tshuva and sefer? Your father was so upset that it got out in public at all." I said, "Really, I didn't know that." So he took it out from that point on. They took it out. The further editions, they took it out. It shouldn't be. He didn't want it in writing. He didn't want it out there. But the Ma'aseh it is. The Ma'aseh, it's too late. Maybe Kadosh Baruch Hu did want it out there, and it's hard to know what the cheshbon is. The Ma'aseh it's out there. So we need to know though that the Baal HaTshuva, the one who wrote that tshuva, held that you can't just say a blanket heter, and you have to always don kol nikol gufo. And one of the tanoim to don is how far along is this person. He was talking about at the time we were discussing the Russians that came to Israel that knew absolutely nothing. The Mamish came out of the Mamish began a Tinuk Shenishba. The Mamish knew nothing, and he held that in the early stages of inviting them, the Mamish know nothing, so you don't have to say anything to them. Just say come. And then when they start knowing a little bit more, then you have to start trying to give them eitzes of staying over for Shabbos. They shouldn't, once they start chopping, there's such thing as Shabbos. And the first time, I know I used to have these Russians over, go down to the hotel and hello by Fagan and invite them. They would come up, and they mamish didn't know. They never set foot in the shul. They had no idea what this was all about. They're just coming to people to eat a meal, as far as they know. They have no idea what it even means Shabbos. But once they get past that getter of Tanakh Shanishba, then you have to start being matziyah, then places to stay and everything. And there also comes a point when they know enough that it becomes usher to invite them anymore. Because at that point, if you keep inviting them and they know enough and they know stark enough, they really know what should be done, but they just, so then it becomes a much bigger problem. Then it becomes, to continue to inviting them could become a chil Hashem. Once they already realize enough is happening, what they really should be doing. So it's a very edel, a very subtle, distinction when someone knows. So you can't just make any kind of klal on this and say this is the halach. There's an overall shaila of lifnei iver, yes, that we can talk about, but to what point it remains mutter or not, or remains okay, the right thing to do. Rosh first remains fire against that altogether, because Rav Moshe Shita and his understanding of Rosh Zalman was against it also. So we heard it differently from Rosh Zalman. The way I heard it from him, it stems with his tshuva. It's just that he made more tanayim on it. It wasn't just a blanket heter. So we're knowing with this in Dallas. We're also knowing to two things. We're knowing we have to keep on sort of judging how far along they are. And number two is we're somewhat on, and this from Hillel David told me, and Rosh Zalman also was meramis to this. He brought it in Madani Shlomo, that if the person, it's much more kal if the person is taka living within walking distance. Unlike Rav Moshe, that if they're going to be lazy, it doesn't help. Rosh Zalman held that it would help if they could walk. That does take away the lifnei iver aspect of it. If it's within, Rav Hillel said within 45 minutes. So then that's considered to get an efshar. So that makes it much more kal. And actually, the very last shaila I ever asked Rosh Zalman, panim al panim, I was visiting Eretz Yisrael before. Last thing I was zocheh to ask him. I met him downstairs. He was walking the street, and I went over to him. I was visiting the first couple of years. So I went over to him and asked him that within what he said, that you can't make a getter, you can't make klolin in this, and we're going to get to Shabbos. So, but even without making mamish a klal, could one say that it's more kal to invite somebody for Friday nights when they're going to come before Shabbos, and if they leave, they leave, as opposed to inviting them to come and say Shabbos day, where they're going to have to for sure drive even just to get to you. Here, at least the hazmana is you're mazmin them in a way that they're coming without Chilul Shabbos. What they do afterwards, they do. It's up to them if they want to leave, stay, whatever. But they're leaving. So he said Avada is for sure more kal that way. The Friday night invitation, they're going to come before Shabbos, is for sure more kal than the Shabbos day invitation. So these are just some of the gedarim, and that's the way we know over here. That and I mentioned to Rosh Zalman that Moshe Asser's b'cholofen. He has no heter whatsoever. So he said, how can you say there's no heter whatsoever? How can you say it's not a question of heterim? It's a question of making a cheshbon of where you're gaining and where you're losing, and it's not a thing to say. So you see that they're looking at it from a whole different vantage point. Moshe is looking at it as a pure, dry din of lifnei iver. Rosh Zalman had a whole different outlook on it. How could you say such a thing? How could you say one just a blanket isser? He for sure held you can't say a blanket heter, but he also held you can't say a blanket isser. But rather you have to look at it and look at all the cheshbonos and look at the distance and where the person's holding and what you're going to gain by it and how far along he is in his development. There's a lot of things that go into this equation to this heter. So there's no blanket isser. There's also no blanket heter. But you have to use, like you said, seichel and Yerushalayim. We're just explaining what some of the seichel is. We can't explain the Yerushalayim, but we can explain some of the seichel. Okay. Any questions before we go weiter?
Yeah. Regarding the Rav Hillel David, so that means you'd be able to you don't even have to do the invite part, right? I mean, to stay overnight. You don't even have to get to that point, right?
I think he didn't stipulate that. If there was, Shlomo Zalman put the two together. He said that people do the Hasmana plus their, and he said, and there's another, some are mitzaref, the fact that they could walk if they really want to. Unless, that wouldn't apply if it would be further away. I don't think he would say it's usher, but then you would just you have to be a little bit more. You have to be more careful to cheshbon it out even more. But Shlomo Zalman coupled the two together as two tzirufim. And for the most part, like in Yerushalayim, there's nowhere you can't walk to. Just about. I mean, theoretically, people do walk from neighborhood to neighborhood in Yerushalayim, and even 45 minutes an hour, people do it all the time. But from Manhattan to Borough Park, it might be a different story. It's for sure a different story. So you have to use other components.
I once heard that the Rav Sternberg holds that if it's something like a Shabbos meal or anything that's like is a positive experience, then that overcomes the Lifnei Iver, because it's not doing something that's B'chal Shabbos with no so'eles. The fact that there's some sort of so'eles there kind of can overcome the Lifnei Iver, because you hope by coming they'll eventually not that on Shabbos. Is that?
That was before we said before for Shlomo Zalman. Then to get to he said it by the food. We're applying this to here as well. By the food, he said that you look at the overall picture, not at the specific avera. So if overall you're bringing makar the person more than you're being machshel them, then it's not that what you're putting in front of them is not a mixel. It's on lifnei iver unless you say what a mixel. A mixel means that what you're doing for them is bringing them further away from Kadosh Baruch Hu. You're tripping them. Rather, in this case, let's say giving them the food that will be makar of them. So you're not tripping them. You're picking them up. You're bringing them up higher than they would have been. So you're looking at the big picture, the whole picture. So what you're telling me, Sternbach, it sounds like he's just mamshech the same sort. That if what you're doing is you're makar of them more than they would be, then lifnei iver it's not. You have to look at other components as well, but strictly outside lifnei iver it's not. And a couple with the fact that they could drive anyway. So if maybe you need it, it's mamish. It's not trey iver to nahar that the guy should drive. If he wants to take a drive, he'll just take a drive without anywhere to go. He just feels like driving, nothing to stop him. So there's a combination of those two things.
I don't know if this is Rav Sternbach, but I saw in the headlines book he brings down as far that it's sakanas nefashos, so you could do a mitzad that.
What's sakanas nefashos?
You're saving someone's neshama. The same way for pikuach nefesh, you could be doche Shabbos. You could do it for someone's not only their goof but their neshama even. I can't remember who he brings that from.
Yeah, on that I would say chas v'shalom, say such a thing. That's what they're all kind of lafuke. That you can't say so. It's not a heter for Chil Shabbos. That
Right.
I hold this mamish kima kfir to say such a thing. But we're not talking about heter Chil Shabbos. The other guys doing Chil Shabbos anyway. We're talking about your lifnei iver. Are you being maver him on something or not? Yeah, it's hard for me to believe anybody else would say.
I'll find. I have it at home. I'll find the headlines book. I'll
People that say things like that are very dangerous, because then it started having these all out heterim for kiruv to have to everything in the same kiruv.
Yeah.
And we do find for real Hatzal's nefashos. So Rabban Kotler's Hatzal to do it that he was working with Hatzalah, trying to save Jews, raise money to buy them off the Nazis, and every few dollars he got could buy another Jew, could save another Jew, and there were wealthy Jews that in the middle of their Friday night meal heard a knock at the door, and they opened the door and they saw Rabban Kotler getting out of a taxi on Shabbos, come and ask them for a donation to save the Jews from the Holocaust. But to try to extrapolate that so then why just them? So you also could get in the car and drive to do a Kiruv seminar on Shabbos. That's all in the foshes. So get in the car and go, and if need be, serve them treif, and and you name it, go do it, because it's salt and foshes. These are very dangerous kind of swords to say.
Well, then you don't have any Shabbos left.
It's always Shabbos, like the guy that said, my Rebbe is bigger. My Rebbe is the biggest. He saw $100 and he said, "Ois Shabbos." First one, Ois river, Ois tree, Ois. Oh, my race. Oh, it's Shabbos. So, okay. That's exactly what Shlomo Zalman was worried about. That's exactly his concern. Okay, now a second shaila that we want to talk about today, which I'm not for a lot of other inyanim as well, but I'll just talk about it is to save time hopefully. Okay, not as much time as I thought. I thought the first thing would take about 15 minutes, and I'm usually wrong with these things. So the shaila, we'll try to go through this quickly then, just to talk it through, of being Masada Kedushin for a couple that's not going to be keeping Taras Mishpacha. Is that a Lifnei Iver shaila or not? So we started off, I gave the Marmakomos, the Shoot Meshu Dover of the Netziv. It already talks about this going back, well over 100, 150 years. The Netziv speaks Barichas about this, and he brings a lot of rayas, which, sugyas which we haven't learned yet, with Tuma and Tara and Truma Smicha and things, but just to try to break it down to the Ikri Sodos. So, number one, Lifnei Iver, he says, is for sure not, because this couple's living together with or without you. They're being over at Isser Nidus with or without you. You're not B'chlal being Lifnei Iver on Isser Nidus. It's not Trei Iver Nahar. They're very much on the same side of the river, right? But he said, but L'chora, maybe there's an Isser Messiah. The Sof Kosof, you are Messiah, then now they'll feel better about it, whatever it's the whole apostles, it should be an Isser Messiah. Because the Messiah, the Ran says clearly that we saw in Avodah Zorah. Tosa said that if it's Tosa in Valvam Bay said that when it's not Trei Iver Nahar, it's mutter, and the Ran said it's mutter b'deraisa, but b'derabbanan it's still asur because of Messiah to give them the food, to give them the nazir, the yain on the same side. That if there is an Isser Messiah, and so he speaks Barichas and Netziv about the discussion we've already had many times. The Shach already asked Astira in Tosis that Tosis in Avodah Zorah says clearly that if there's no Trei Iver Nahar, there's no Isser at all. You're allowed to give them the food. So this mumar Avodah Zorah, mumar it's also given Trei food because he's going to be mumar Chal Shabbos. Mumar Avodah Zorah, then he's going to for sure eat this food. It's asur. I'm sorry. It says that even so, he's for sure going to eat it. If it's not Trei Iver Nahar, it's mutter. So the Shach asked the stira that in the beginning of Shabbos, discussed many times, they said over there that even when there's not Trei Iver Nahar, still there's an Isser Messiah. And they're trying to explain, and the Harn explain that when there's that since the Torah is Machayav us, Lafrushim Yisura, whenever you can, you have to mafsha somebody make Isser. Then Kosher you can't Messiah to do an Isser. So that's an Isser, the Ran says that's an Isser Drabanan. So we discussed that that's maybe it's even Isser Draisa in certain cases. And the Ran is only saying, the Rishonim say it's Drabanan, that's only when they can do it on their own and you can't really stop them. So then the Shach held that if he's a mumar and you can't stop him, then there's no Isser at all, because there's no Chiyuv the Frishim Yisura. That was the Shach answered the Steer and Tosis that one's talking about a mumar and you can't stop him, and that's why the Dogam Rabba you can't stop him, and he's a mumar, he does it himself anyway. So Lifnei Iver it's not, and also Messiah it's not, because you have no Chiyuv the Frishim Yisura. But the Tosis and Shabbos is talking about not a mumar, it's talking about a regular person where you could stop him. So then, since you're chayav la'frishim yisura, you're also chayav to not be Messiah him. That was the Shach's teretz. So others are cholik. So the Mishidover brings the Netziv, the Binyan Sion. Sorry, the Binyan Sion, which he didn't say where it is. In Simon Tesvav, Binyan Sion is the Shaz and Shuvas of the Orach Laner. Very very chashuv Shuvas. So there he also speaks to Arichas about this. We're going to get into a different Shiloh. He's talking to the whole Shiloh of Me'iver. And he has kashas on the Shach's teretz. So he wants to say a new teretz, that the chiluk is a Messiah, the Isser Messiah, which is Midrabanan, is the Messiah b'shasa avera. In a case where there's no Lifnei Iver, but you can't, your Chayv Lafrushim Yisura means when it comes to do an avera, you have to stop him. In the same way you have to stop him, you also can't be Messiah him to do it. but that's b'shas isser. But to give him something that he could, that there's no lifnei iver, and you give him something that he might be able to use later, not now when you give it to him. So that there's no isser Messiah, because right now he's not doing any isser to be mafreshim. So also there's also no isser of siyua to give him to him, because he might do an aver later on, if he's for sure going to do it. So it's already the chiluk and kusam gimel that you can't give somebody food if they're going to not wash, and the washing, it's not happening right this minute. They're already the Magen of Ram there, and the Mishnah Ruah speak about the chiluk if you put it in his mouth, give it mamish right now to eat this very second, or to give it to him they might eat later, like we saw the other tshuva from the I forgot what his name is right now, the Hungarische tshuva. We talked about selling the bread, and there's a whole shot of what he might do with it later on. He might sell it, he might give it to somebody else. Maybe he'll eat pachas kasher, he won't need a bench, maybe he already washed something else. You know, all kinds of svaras, it's all about later on. So, according to what the Binyan Sion's chiluk is that in all cases like that, there is no Isser Messiah, because it's not, the Isser Messiah is only mamish b'shas avera, and that way he wants to machalik between the two Tosfos and Avodah Zarah that say it's mutter is talking about not b'shas avera. That's why he doesn't talk about the Isser Messiah. Tosfos and Shabbos were right away, you know, obviously over there, he's taking the object and he's taking it right out from your hand, right out from your Rishus Yachid to Rishus Rabbin. So there's an immediacy by holding the object there and taking it. There's an immediate Chil Shabbos going on. So then that is Messiah Mamish B'Shas Avera. That's why he says over there is the Isser of Messiah. That's the Binyan Sion's teretz, and that's what the Meshri Dover, the Nesiv, goes with that Binyan Sion, with that chiluk. So he wants to say then, since that's a pshat and tosfos in the rush, so when it comes to doing a chasana for a couple, that later on they might do what they might do and not being over Isser Nida, so that's not happening b'shas chuppah. That's not. There's no. Nothing happening. That's not b'shas ma'isa. That's what they might do with each other later on. But you're not. So lifnei iver, it's not because they could be over anyway. In Messiah, it's also not because it's not b'shas avera. That's what he wants to say according to Rashi and Tosfos. However, so he goes on. I'm sure you saw there. He goes on to he talks through. There's a Rashi and a Ran that without going into all the cases they bring there, that it's usher even chiyagavna, like let's say to help a woman grind up her wheat, that she might use later on to put water in it, and the wheat is truma, and you're helping her grind it up, or you're giving her a kalim to help her grind up her wheat, and then right now it's not makabel tuma, but this woman is in Eshes Am Haaretz, and she'll touch the truma once it gets water, and it's hooked to the makabel tuma, and she'll bring it to tuma. So you're messiah her. She'll do it. She can do it even without you, but you're making it easier for her. So you're messiah her. So Rashi and Ran hold that it's mutter only it's a special heter b'pnei darkei shalom. Chazal said a special heter for that b'pnei darkei shalom. Again, in this case, it's not lifnei iver, but it is l'charetz messiah, and they have to come onto a special bezunder heter of b'pnei darkei shalom. And he brings a right from the Rambam as well, and so he holds like the Rashi and the Ran. You need the heter of darkei shalom. So there's the Yerushalmi he brings that we say it's mutter because of a tliya. We can be told that maybe she will do it right, maybe she won't put the water in it, maybe she'll give it to somebody else. There are different tliyas, but the Bavli obviously doesn't go with that because the Bavli had to come on to a heter of mipnei darkei shalom. So we see that even in the case you can be told, still we have to come on to this new sfora of darkei shalom because the Isser Messiah lifnei iver might not be where you have to be told on. But Messiah, that the Isra is not to be Gorim, any Jew to do anything wrong, so then that would still apply even where you have Tliyas, according to the Bavli, the way he learns. So you have to come on to a special new heter of darkei shalom, and he expands the heter, brings rise to expand that heter to also, if that's your job, if that's your parnasa, that the Surah of darkei shalom also applies to that as well. So the Maskana, he ends off saying that if you're the Masada Kedushin for them, so Be'etzim it's totally in a machlokas, Tosfos the Rosh on one side, and Rashi and the Ran and the Rambam on the other side. According to Tosfos and the Rosh, it needs to be B'shasa Avera, so the chuppah is not B'shasa Avera, then it's no problem at all. According to Rashi and the others, then Shasa Avera is not a heter, but you have to come on to Darki Shalom or Parnasa, Schar. So he wants to say that if your Parnasa is the Masada Kedushin, you're a Rav, that's your Parnasa, and that's part, a chelik of your Tafkidim is to be Masada Kedushin, so then it's Nichlal and heter of Schar. And then it'll be much of the Kuli Alma. If not, if you're just doing it as a favor, so then you're probably better off, passing it off to somebody else, because then it's totally in the Smachot Shoshanim. That's the way the Meshuv Davar ends off. I've struggled diuk from Shlomo Zalman. I only, after seeing this tshuva, the Mafreya, understood now what he said. That one time I had a similar Maisa in Eretz Yisrael, and it helped a couple out, and I was working with them for a while. But they clearly, after a discussion with them, they weren't going to keep Taras Mishpacha. So when I brought to Shlomo Zalman, he said, better to leave it to like a Rav from the Rabbanut to do it. You should just hold your hands. Just stand back and let a Rav from the Rabbanut do it. So I didn't really know where it's coming from, but now I see that maybe he was going with this for the Meshuv Davar. That if it's a Parnasa, let's say it's Schar, then it's Nichal and the heter of, according to these Rishonim, the heter of Darkei Shalom. So he felt that someone who's a Rav and the Rabbanut, that's part of their job is to Masada Kedushin, then they have that heter, which I don't have, because I'm just doing it as a favor of Achinam. So, okay, that's, but the Maisa of Shlomo Zalman himself, when it came down to the Ikar Din, I discussed it with him, and I gave you the pages in the Madani Shlomo, what we discussed. So just to talk through it a little bit, he says, when it gets to Lifnei Iver, again, he chazed over this point, that you can't say there's any Lifnei Iver, because they're over all this anyway. And also Rul Yashiv, it's brought down Shem Rul Yashiv, I saw the same as for, that they're over this anyway. You can't say there's any problem of Lifnei Iver. But again, to the future Mikshol, so he also, he never mentioned any problem with Sayeh. So I assume he make her, either he held like more the halacha, like the Rashi and Tosfos, like the Russian Tosfos, that there's not a problem at all, or maybe he held, since we're discussing doing it L'Shem Kiruv, maybe that L'Shem Kiruv also will be in place of Mipnei Darkei Shalom. Or the end of Darkei Shalom Godel is there if I carve somebody. That so perhaps that's what he held, because one discussion he did mention that to give it to Rab from the Rabbanut, but as a general discussion about the whole Indian, we had the second time there he didn't mention anything about this Indian. So now what about the other? There's another problem of possibly of Lifnei Iver over here. If you're Masada, if they just stay single, they're just living together. So then if she decides one day to go to somebody else, then there's no Avera. There's an Avera, but there's no Avera of Eshes Ish. But if you Masada Kedushin for them, so then now if she just goes off in, especially certain kibbutzim, places that are hefker, so then she might just go off and do what she wants to do even while she's married, or she might get divorced without a kosher get. We have to worry about that. So he to that he said that we have a klal gadol when it comes to Lifnei Iver, which we saw in the Sugya and Tesvav and Beis, that hechet talinan, where there's mat to be tola on, according to Rashi, even by Deraisa, where there was mat that there were tola on, there's no issur of Lifnei Iver on that, because as we explained, it's not called a mikshol. You didn't put a mikshol in front of it. You put them something that's par of bet, something can be used this way or that way. So he said that something which with this eno matzui, and it's only by those that are mamish mufkar. You don't have to be choshish that they're going to go and do such a thing. It's not your chiyuv to be choshish that. It's not a problem with Iver, because most people don't do that. They don't go off and mamish hefker while they're still married. And if they do, that doesn't become our Lifnei Iver, because certainly we have a talinan that they're not going to do that. I mentioned him that there was, he seemed to know about it, but I mentioned there was a Rav in the north that for this reason, he was Masada Kedushin by hundreds of people, and he always took like an aide that's one of the Krovim, like a brother or something of the Chassan, to make sure to be possible the chuppah in order there shouldn't be this problem. So Rosh Hashanah blew up. And he said two things. First of all, a yid wants to do a mitzvah. Who gives you the right to make bonus and possible his mitzvah? Number two, he said that Nesuin is from the Ikar Tzura of Klal Yisrael. So if to destroy the institution of Nesuin is to destroy the whole foundation of the Yisod of Klal Yisrael. Shmuel first told me another story. Shmuel first told me in another tremendous chiddush from Shemer Moshe that even if it would be a problem with Ne'iver of any of these things, still it would be mutter to let's say, are you allowed to make a shidduch? Like that's part of the question of here. Not only to just do the chuppah, but are you allowed to make a shidduch? There's a Jewish guy, a Jewish girl, and they're not from. And if you make this shidduch and it goes, they're going to get married, or they're going to stay together, whatever, married or not. But they're not going to be kitaras mishpacha. Can I make that shidduch? Right now they're not together. Right now they're not doing this. Maybe that he doesn't have a girlfriend, she doesn't have a boyfriend. You know that. So they're not being over in Averas right now. But to make this shidduch, you're going to cause this Avera. So Rabbi first told me that Moshe said that now in the Kufa we're living, he's talking 40-something years ago, that Rov, you didn't go off to Goyim. If you don't make the shidduch, then they're going to go to Goyim. Since Rov, then it's Beketer Shasa Shmad. Shasa Shmad, we can matzel people even if to matzel people from being lost, even when it's when it means that it's going to cause them to do an avera. Now, this is not. Yes, this is not the same thing that quote was saying. This is very different. This is saying that you might cause them to be over in Nisranidus right now, but otherwise they're going to marry a goy and be lost from Klal Yisrael. So that Ramesh held is Shasa Shmad, and therefore that taka Shasa Shmad could override just every Ma'aseh Kiruv. You're not makar of them. It's not Shasa Shmad, but in this case, since it's matzoi that they're in, and that was Ramesh back in the day when the percentages were much lower. Kal v'chomer today, and especially in the small towns, the percentages are 80%, 90%. The lower percentages are only because you're factoring in New York and some of the bigger cities. When you factor them out, in the small towns, you could easily be hitting 80% or more marrying going. So then, if we get a Shasa Shmad, then Adrabi, you should make that shidduch.
Rabbi, just to play the devil's advocate, isn't it a bigger issa to be together with a nida than it is to be midaraisa with a goya?
Yeah, so mitzad the ma'aseh, yes, but mitzad the mahusa the yid that he'll be lost from Klal Yisrael, then the other thing is much worse. That's what Moshe said. In Hanami, every kol avera v'avera, then it's worse. Mitzad the examais avera, or even that's a little schwer because the Gemara says in Samach and Shabbos that Etinuk Shenishba only brings one chatas because there was no yediyah b'intayim. He never had a yediyah mafsekes b'intayim to bring multiple chatos. So he brings one chatas for his whole life. So there's no yediyah b'intayim. So really, it's all like one ma'aseh avera. That's him. But that one ma'aseh avera is still worse than the ma'aseh avera of a goya, even though that gufa, the ma'aseh of the goya is on that there's the din of kanayim pogim boy. So Be'etzim, you could kill him for that. The Shas Ma'aseh. So because kanayim pogim boy, the level of Chil Hashem is much greater even than an avera of karas. So Moshe held that's overall Surah of Shas Shmad makes it much worse. So Kapanim, now just to end off, that one of the tshuvas I gave you to look at was Rosh Hashanah has a very powerful tshuva, and I'm bringing this in my Ger Sefer to talk about this at length, that Rosh Hashanah writes that there's a sheet of people out there that hold that you say dvarm shel lev and a dvarm when it comes to gerus. That if somebody, there are certain rabbanim out there that are megayer people just because they say in front of the basin, yes, I'll keep all the mitzvahs, even though it's clear that he in his mind he knows he's not going to do that. Based on that, they're megayer him because they say, well, the Gemara says dvarm shel lev and a dvarm. You say one thing, and you're thinking something else, then we go by what you say, not what you're thinking. So therefore, if they say they're going to kabbalah mitzvahs, then that's enough to megayer them. So we don't hold this way. We hold that Moshe writes to Jews. Everybody that we hold is not chal at all. Garnished, they're going Gemara. But Rosh Zalman writes that according to those who do this, the shitasam that it works, they say to Rosh Hashanah, then the shitasam that they become gerim, but they're not going to keep mitzvahs. Then these people that are megayer them are over lifnei iver midaraisa. Because before, all the traits they ate and all the Shabbos and Machal and everything was garnished. They're going. Well, the shitascha, you hold that they become that what they thought in their mind doesn't matter, and they become gerim, but now they're going to go right back to everything they were doing. So then every avera they have is now you're lifnei iver. You're responsible for all those averas they wouldn't have before. Now they do. He says there's no chilek between being makarev the kos yain to the nazir to makarev the nazir to the kos yain. If you take the nazir across the river to where the wine is, you're also over lifnei iver, just like you bring the wine to the nazir. In this case, you're bringing this yid, the shitascha that it's a yid, you're bringing him to the averas that he wouldn't have had before. It's like you're makarev nazir liyain, and now you're over lifnei iver for every avera that he has. And there's also the Minchas Elazar, one of the great Garsha poskim, says the same thing. He says if you megayer somebody that you didn't teach him first how to make brachos, say Shema, how to do these things, and now that you megayer him and he's going to go on day by day not doing these things, then you're over lifnei iver every day that he doesn't say Kriya Shema, doesn't daven, doesn't say brachos, eats without a bracha. You're mechuyev lifnei iver for all these things that the person is doing. And also Rav Kook, also in his tshuvas paskins clearly also that there's an Esrei lifnei iver. So there's one of the postkei Eretz Yisrael from the former head of the Beis Din of the Rabbanut in Yerushalayim, Bitam Chacham Rav Aram Chaim Sherman. So he had a lot of kashas on Rosh Zalman's psak that it should be lifnei iver because l'chora when you're megayer them, so then it's lifnei to lifnei. It's hard, but there's no avera that's matzi right now. Going with the svara that we just saw from the Netziv and from the Meishu Davar and from the what do you call it, the Aruch LaNer, that the chilik and tosis, whether it's b'shas ma'isa or not b'shas ma'isa, and so we megayer them, it's not b'shas ma'isa of any avera that they're doing. So why would Rosh Zalman hold that it's a problem of lifnei iver? So he wants to answer. He was really bothering him a lot, and he said he went to Rosh Zalman and asked this question. Rosh Zalman was already much older, and Rosh Zalman said, "I'm not holding the sugi right now. I can just tell you that we learned it well, and there's for sure what to be. If we said it, we said it for a reason." So he went back and he thought of it. He worked on it, and he came up with the conclusion that, of course, Rosh Zalman was right, but he came up with the new chiddush to explain why. Is that when did this poskim say that it has to be a shas ma'isa to be the iver? That's only in a case where the avera was already there, we're already existing in the world. Now it's a shaila of is he going to be over or not? You're helping him being over that. So that we say that if you have to be b'shas ma'isa, not lifnei, and all these type of tanoim. Masha enken, in this case, when you're megayer somebody, you're not just bringing him to the isser. Which Shlomo Zalman really meant, you're not just bringing him to the isser that wasn't there before. You're creating the isser. You're creating the isser didn't exist at all for this person. It just didn't exist. Not that the chayvus didn't exist, the avera didn't exist. You're creating the avera when you megayer them. So in that case, then all these tanaim fall off. That's what he wanted to say. Why it should be lifnei iver. So that's what he wanted to say. I just thought about it afterwards, just thinking about it this morning, that perhaps you could take issue with this whole kasha to begin with. His whole kasha was this svara of tosis that it has to be b'shas avera. And that's what the Achronim say. But they didn't say this legabe lifnei iver. They said it legabe mesayea. They're going under the assumption that there is no lifnei iver. This chiluk of b'shas avera, not b'shas avera, only applies to Messiah. It doesn't apply to Lifnei Iver itself. Lifnei Iver, then we know it's even not mamish b'shas avera. Just like Tosa says, it depends if you know he's going to eat it or not, but it doesn't have to be shas avera. We don't find such a tnai. The lifnei that we find, that's only, it's said by two different people. It's like if it's you give it to one person, then he's going to another person. That's what we find lifnei. But if it's not going to be a shasa ma'isa, we don't find a lifnei by that. If you brought him the wine, he's not going to drink it now. He'll drink it later, whatever. So that's still a full lifnei Iver. We don't find such a hiluk. But so Mela, I think the kasha doesn't even begin. If you created the person with this avera, and he's going to be over the avera, if it's going to be hours later or days later, it doesn't make a difference. You created it, so now it's mamish lifnei Iver. So I think this whole kasha doesn't begin to begin with.
Can you ask a kasha just like why don't you say that you could be tola here?
Well, that's the thing. If you know this person is totally not from, he has no intention to be from, so then what's there to be told on? Like by the food also. If the person has no idea that such a thing as a bracha, you can't say all these tliyas. Maybe he'll suddenly wake up and make a bracha. Like it's a chukah to say that. You can't just make it up. So if somebody has no intention, let's say you marry this girl that to marry this guy, and the guy's completely, totally not from, and he's eating the velas of Trefus, and he's Mechal Shabbos for Hesia. You're going to marry her, and she stands there and says, "Yes, I'll keep all the mitzvahs." You know, with the little snicker in her eye. You know, so what tzliya do you possibly have that she's not going to be Mechal Shabbos? She's not going to be over Nisr Nidus. She's not going to be over Nevelas of Trefus. So, and that's the cases that we're talking about. These people that are making up these heterim, the Megayer people, Kaviyachol in the army, and all these Russians that have no intention whatsoever of doing anything, and they don't. I think the number that they found out of these army conversions is somewhere around the 99% that are completely not Shomer Torah mitzvahs, and they continue to do it because they're saying that they have other shtusim they say as well that Kabbalah's mitzvahs that was only in the days that we didn't have a Medina, and all there was mitzvahs, so they couldn't become Jewish without mitzvahs. And now we have a Medina and an army, so just to be, I'm going to say, be Megayer, to be part of the land of Israel and to be part of the Jewish people, and maybe go light candles here and there, or go here and there for a holiday to shul. Yes, some kesher to that's enough to be Jewishy. That you're Megayer to that. That's all you need. These are supposedly Orthodox rabbis saying this. So in the Chorban Gadol is what they're saying. But on top of that, Shlomo Zalman is writing that I tell all those people that they think that it works, that they should realize that they're all over Lifnei Iver for every Avera that these people are over. So she tells them that they're Jewish. Okay.
But on the flip side, you could say that they have at least the schus of all the mitzvahs. At least people do.
That's part of their their thing. But we don't find it's not totally in schusim like. So fine, you can have. Oh, that's very nice. You have some schusim of the few mitzvahs they're going to do. So maybe they gave tzedakah here and there, right? But in the meantime, every single week they're Chal Shabbos. Every other day they're over Isser Nidus. Every day, 4 or 5 times a day they're over Nevelas and Trefus, and Tarfus. So you choose. You can have a few mitzvahs, but you have many averos kamuras, lav and deraisa of lifnei Iver, lo sitei mikshol, lav deraisa. You're over day after day after day, with a few mitzvahs sprinkled in between.
It's interesting because I'm just thinking maybe there's a chiluk in the fact that you're not putting the mikshol, you're putting the Iver there.
That's what Shlomo said. There's no difference between bringing the wine to the nazir to bringing the nazir to the wine.
Oh, right. Okay, right. Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So, it's Geschmack. So I think I'd like to write up, I think it'd be good to concretize this, just to have like a short book on this. So we'll work on that for, hopefully for next week with Hashem. And then I believe NCSY goes on summer break. So I have a couple of swarm to go through over the summer. So I think it'll be good to go through a couple English books on Amir Lakum, which would be a great way to see a practical halacha of Amir Lakum, what we saw. The Chazal say that Zareh ve'enu kotzer, Lomid ve'enu chozer, because Zareh ve'enu kotzer. So we spent almost a year on Amir Lakum. It'd be a shame to let it float away before we could see a couple svarim that are halacha l'maisa, which will bring everything back in our minds and also concretize it and make it clear. So, with Hashem, we'll do that soon. Have a great Shabbos.
Shkoyach, thank you so much.
Good.